30 meters soared above Jerusalem. Inner chambers gleamed with roughly 27 tons of refined gold. 2 bronze pillars, 8 meters high and 34 tons apiece, guarded the entrance. Cedar from Lebanon paneled the walls. Polished cypress formed the floors. 2 colossal cherubim, about 4.5 meters tall, stretched gilded wings across the inner sanctuary. Solomon's temple was not merely a shrine, it was the apex of ancient engineering, finance, artistry, and logistics. 7 years carried the work to completion, consuming more precious metal than any contemporary project on record. One puzzle, however, defies easy explanation. Foundation blocks approached 400 tons, set without cranes, steel pulleys, or modern wheel systems, and yet seated with hair-breadth precision. For many today, the figures feel less like construction notes and more like a riddle. This film uncovers the craft, materials, and organization that made that achievement possible, and why no one has reproduced it at full scale since. Solomon refused to begin with ordinary stone. 1 Kings 5:17 speaks of great stones, costly stones. Later investigations of the Second Temple platform on the same mount have identified monoliths exceeding 400 tons, comparable to the mass of dozens of adult elephants. Now imagine freeing such volumes from limestone ridges without explosives or power tools. Some 80,000 cutters labored in multiple quarries encircling the city. They left home before dawn, reached the faces of rock, and performed the most hazardous tasks of the enterprise. Accuracy mattered more than brute force, and a governing rule shaped every choice. 1 Kings 6:7 declares that the sound of iron tools must not be heard at the build site. Stones needed to arrive ready, dimensions, faces, and angles finished off-site. Ancient techniques supplied the answer. Masons scored guidelines using harder stones, then drilled narrow holes along those paths. Dry wooden wedges went in, water followed. As the wood swelled, internal pressure cleaved the limestone exactly where intended. No detonations, no hammer-on-chisel clatter near the sanctuary. After splitting, specialists dressed, squared, and checked each block. Without paper blueprints, foremen marked codes directly onto the pieces, letters, numerals, and symbols indicating location and orientation. A misread mark could doom hundreds of tons of material. The quarries were deadly. Collapses, sliding blocks, and falling debris took lives. With no helmets, harnesses, or nearby clinics, serious injuries were often final. Why did workers return? Israelite laborers served paid rotational duty and could go home between stints. Canaanites assigned to corvée, 1 Kings 9:21, had no option. Extraction was only stage 1. Transport killed more people than cutting. How do you move a 400-ton monolith across ridges and ravines? 70,000 men were dedicated solely to hauling. Earthen ramps climbed and descended the terrain. Crews set the stone on timber rollers, wrapped it with massive plant fiber ropes, and heaved in cadence to a supervisor's commands. After a surge, stop, reset rollers, heave again. Progress measured in centimeters. Teams ate and slept beside the load for days or weeks. Ropes eventually frayed under extreme strain. When one failed, momentum shifted violently. Men were thrown, pinned, or crushed as blocks slid backward. There was no compensation, only replacement. Israelite rotation, 1 month on, 2 months off, offered recovery. Forced laborers endured without relief. Exposure, infection, fatigue, and accidents pushed mortality highest among the haulers. Still, deadlines held. Stones reached Mount Moriah, and then the strict rule returned: no iron noise at the site. Placement had to be exact the first time. If a block sat a finger's width wrong, crews reversed the entire sequence and tried again. Overseers enforced standards with harsh penalties, reduced rations, lashes, or worse. Stone wasn't the only logistical mountain. Solomon required Lebanese cedar by the thousands. The forests lay about 200 kilometers away, over mountains, across valleys, and beyond Israel's border. 1 Kings 5:6-11 records the treaty with Hiram of Tyre. Sidonian experts would fell and prepare the timber. Israel would supply vast quantities of grain and oil in payment, an extraordinarily expensive arrangement, yet essential for the project. 10,000 Israelites rotated to Lebanon, 1 Kings 5:14, organized by Adoniram. Skilled crews dropped ancient cedars, cut them to length, and shifted them downhill to the coast. Transport ran in two legs. First, rafts, logs lashed together and guided by boats along the Mediterranean to Joppa, modern Jaffa, Tel Aviv. Storms regularly tested lashings. Losses at sea occurred. Second, overland, roughly 60 kilometers from Joppa to Jerusalem, using rollers, ropes, and muscle, like the stones, but with more delicacy. Dragging would scar cedar, so movement was slow and careful. Workers slept outdoors and lived on basic rations. Illness and exhaustion took their toll. Replacements filled the gaps. Silence at the mount remained non-negotiable. To honor the site's sanctity, the entire project functioned like a choreography. Levers, wooden wedges, measured signals, and controlled motion. No pounding metal. The theology drove the method. This was the dwelling of the Holy One, not a palace. Reverence shaped procedure from foundation to finial. Metalwork elevated the interior from remarkable to resplendent. Furnaces glowed through the night. Gold softened in crucibles. Smiths hammered plates thin as leaf, then fastened and polished them until surfaces mirrored light. At the center stood Hiram from Tyre, Phoenician on his father's side, a widow's son of Naphtali on his mother's, cf. 1 Kings 7:13-14. Renowned for bronze, he executed pillars named Jachin and Boaz, 8 meters high, and cast the immense basin supported by 12 oxen. Yet gold was the greater burden. 1 Kings 6:20-22 describes the Holy of Holies, 9 by 9 by 9 meters, overlaid entirely with pure gold, walls, ceiling, floor. This was not paint, but beaten metal mounted over cedar. 1 Kings 10:14 notes Solomon's yearly intake of 666 talents, over 22 tons, supplying the sanctuary and royal treasuries. Sculptors carved wood forms. Metalworkers applied and burnished gold until edges vanished. Furniture, chains, the incense altar, and the towering cherubim all gleamed. Heat burns and dehydration were constant risks. Shifts rotated to keep men alive, and the furnaces fed. Coordinating manpower was itself a masterwork. Roughly 150,000 laborers spread across quarries, forests, foundries, and the mount. 1 Kings 5:16 lists 3,300 overseers. Above them, 550 principal officers, cf. to 1 Kings 9:23. The structure resembled a field army. Supervisors assigned tasks before sunrise, tracked productivity, swapped in reserves, issued warnings, and, when necessary, punished misconduct. Incentives existed too. Israelite crews completing a month received provisions of grain, oil, and wine sufficient for the home interval. Friendly rivalry lifted output and, remarkably, no large-scale revolt, war diversion, or sweeping plague halted the timeline. In the 8th month of Solomon's 11th year, the last element locked into place, precisely as planned. Dedication followed at the Feast of Tabernacles, 1 Kings 8. All Israel gathered, priests bore the ark into the inner sanctuary. Solomon prayed. Then the house filled with a cloud, the kavod, the glory of the Lord, so weighty that the priests could not stand to minister. 1 Kings 8:10-11. Years of sweat, danger, and discipline culminated in a visible sign that the God of Israel had taken residence. The king marked the occasion with 22,000 oxen and 120,000 sheep, 1 Kings 8:63, numbers matching the project's scale. Thus ended one of antiquity's most audacious undertakings, immense stones set in silent timber drawn across sea and hills, metals worked to radiance, and a workforce marshaled with military precision, constructed not only to be seen, but to honor the presence.